Hey everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres, and we're back again today talking about gardening. Now last time I talked about things like grow zones and last frost dates, first frost dates, that sort of thing. And those are really important things to understand. If you're a casual gardener, just somebody who's going to buy a plant down at the local box store and toss it in a pot or toss it in the ground and grow it, this may not be some information that you need. But if you're trying to up your game in the garden, we have a lot of stuff to talk about. Last time we talked about using a seed starting date calculator from Johnny Select Seeds to figure out when you need to start your seeds. If you're just planting a tiny little garden with one or two things, this may not be important for you. In a previous video, Henry and I discussed the fact that when we set up our yearly calendar, one of the things we look at is our dates of responsibility. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, dates that I'm not going to be there, or that I'm not going to be available for gardening at least, or at least minimal gardening. So for instance, if I was volunteering at a vacation Bible school for 2 weeks in the middle of, say, the summer, it's usually, vacation Bible school was usually in July, but some places had more than one session. So you need to look at whatever you're doing with your local group. Okay, so say your vacation Bible school starts the weekend or the week after 4th of July weekend and goes for 2 weeks. Okay, you know that during that time frame, you're not going to want to have a major harvest of any vegetable come off because you're going to be there early in the morning, you're going to be with kiddies all day, and at the end of that day, you are going to be tired. Okay, but if you had to, you could water in the morning, and you could water in the evening, but you don't want to have a major harvest. So put that on your calendar and try and work around that when it comes to harvest. Now, as we know, Mother Nature can be a little variable these days, so you may need to wing it or figure a way to just hold things some. We don't always get what we want. Sometimes our plants come off sooner than we wanted, sometimes they come off later. But we can at least try not to have major harvests of any one particular plant coming off at that time frame. It would even be more serious if I was just going to be plain gone. Say, when my son was a Boy Scout, he'd be gone for weeks. You know, it depends on the Boy Scout camp you're going to as to how long you can stay there. It'd be anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks, depending on the camp you're going to. And if you were a counselor at that camp, you're going to be gone too. And you are not going to be home at all, so somebody else has to be there to water, to weed, to keep your plants alive, and oh, to harvest. So put that on your calendar. Is there something you're trying to avoid in your environment? For instance, sometimes people will tell you, don't plant too early in the season because the pest pressure is higher for this particular type of thing early than it is later. For instance, we discovered that if we planted, and this is back when we first started planting here, if we planted our beans and stuff super early, there were a lot more bean beetles wandering around at that time than there would be later. And by postponing planting just a couple of weeks, we could actually avoid most of that, so we wouldn't have to spray. Now, since we have been controlling the environment, cleaning out places where they might live, occasionally spraying with organic sprays if we needed to, we still may choose to plant early, but if we plant early, we will cover our plants with row cover. Now, what is row cover? Row cover in different places in the world can be different things. But what we call row cover in the United States is usually it's just white, and it looks like fabric, except it's not woven. And yeah, it's a non-woven fabric is what it is. It's just an extruded plastic thing. They all disintegrate. They all disintegrate over time. So it's a matter of how thick a product you buy and the products will have numbers associated with them. So, for instance, one of the major brands is Agribon. There's a bunch of them out there in terms of different brands, and some of them are kind of no name. I usually stick with a name brand simply because I like to know what I have. And if I buy, what do they call them? At the big box stores here, they're calling them frost blankets. And they just are a white fabric that you drape over things if you know you have frost coming and you're trying to protect things. Sometimes the information with those frost blankets, as they're calling them, is kind of vague. Whereas if I buy from an established seed source, like Parks, Harris, Johnny's, any of those guys like that sells a cover, they'll tell you what it's rated for. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the fabric comes in different thicknesses and therefore gives different levels of protection. Some of the row covers are used only to keep bugs off. So the very lightest Agribon row covers are very see-through. They let almost all the light come through, but they keep the bugs off. So in the UK and places like that, I see them using bug screens for the same thing. It's very hard to find bug screens here. I'm not sure why. I think it's just not part of our culture. But if I live someplace where, like if I put a bug screen on mine here, the mice would immediately chew through it and destroy the bug screen, and I wouldn't have one anymore. But I would really love to be able to use them for certain types of things because it'd be very handy, especially on pots and stuff. But I haven't worked that out yet. I'm working on it still. I have some ideas. I also don't want to spend $15 per pot for a bug screen, which is the kind of prices that I'm finding here for covers. They look like a shower cap for yeah, it does look like a shower cap for a pot. And I can't afford $15 a pot when I'm running 20, 30 pots. Nope. You can buy super white light row covers that can be used just for keeping the bugs off. In the spring, when we plant things, if we are planting early, say for my beans, I would cover them with a row cover. And I would simply take PVC pipes and I would create hoops over the top of them, and then I would cover the whole thing with row covers and pin down the edges as best I could. And that would simply physically create a barrier between the bugs and the plants. Just literally makes them not be able to get to your plants. It's not 100%, but it really does make a huge difference. So if you're going to be pushing your stuff around because of your schedule, that's something to think about. We talked about earlier about using a seed starting date calculator. Now, how would I use that? Well, I would literally have my calculator that I printed out, in this case from Johnny's, and I would take a piece of paper and I would say, okay, I usually go through February, March, April, May, June, depending on what I'm starting. And I will literally just make little messy lists. And then I tend to rewrite things later because I want to have a nice, neat list that I can use. But what I wind up with is something like this. It has February, and it gives date ranges. The 6th through the 20th start onions. The 6th through the 27th start, this has also got flowers, dianthus. 20, leeks. 20th through the 13th, peas. 20th through 20th, spinach. Okay? And what that allows me to do as I'm planning my year is I can see really easily if I'm going to have any conflicts. Historically, we had problems in February because we used to have an event around President's Day weekend, and if I was trying to start things early, I had to work around that. I wasn't going to be here for a week. The worst problem for us was actually in March because we needed to start tomatoes and stuff like that in March. Now, initially I had gotten some information somewhere that said that I should be starting them earlier than I was or something. It was just one of those weird things. I must have read something, and sometimes, you know, they always say, don't believe everything you read. Well, I was starting stuff at the very, very beginning of March, We no longer start tomatoes and stuff like that at the beginning of March. We now start at the last week of March. There are people who will say, don't plant anything before Mother's Day. Well, Mother's Day's in May. That works if you're going to buy your plants somewhere else. The information that you get on your seed packets will tell you whether they recommend that the plant be transplanted or direct seeded. Direct seeded means I simply take whatever I'm going to plant it into and I literally plant the seeds there. Whereas transplanted means I start my seeds somewhere else and then I move them to the location where I'm going to grow them out later. And one of the things you have to figure out if you're trying to grow a bunch of different kinds of fancy stuff that you maybe, especially if you've never grown it before, is how long it's going to take before that plant is regular set out. Now, some companies will tell you, I'm 99% sure that Haas tells you, most of your reputable companies will tell you. Haas will tell you, Johnny's will tell you, Parks and Harris will both tell you. One of my favorite tomato catalogs actually is Totally Tomatoes, but they don't give you a lot of information sometimes. Sometimes they're kind of thinking you know what you're doing, which may or may not be true. I know that if I'm going to start tomatoes, let's see what it says here in this seed starting thing here. Tomatoes, tomatoes, tomatoes. Here we go. Number of weeks to start seeds before setting out date. 6 to 8 weeks. Okay. So if I want to set my plants out, because this whole piece of information here is based on my growing area, which is last date of frost, May 15th. If I want to set my tomatoes out between May 22nd and May 29th, I need to start my tomato seeds 6 to 8 weeks before that, which means March 27th through April 17th is when I need to be starting them. And that is why a bunch of people just go buy plants. Honestly, if you're just going to grow a couple of plants, do your research, figure out what you want to grow in terms of cherry tomatoes or plum tomatoes or whatever it is you like, and go buy the plants. Most of your popular varieties will be available at the big box store or at the local nursery. Sometimes, I know in our area, there's a little farmer's market that travels around a little bit. One of our neighbors grows seedlings that he sells at the farmer's market. I've seen them there before, and they look great. They were very sturdy, healthy-looking tomato plants. So if he had the varieties that I wanted, I'd pick them up from him. Not a problem. The reason you grow your own tomato plants or pepper plants or something like that that's going to be transplanted in is because you want either more pepper and tomato plants than you could possibly afford, or you want very specific varieties, or you just like growing things. All very good reasons to grow your own. I have friends that will grab a couple of plants at a big box store. They will make a note of what the variety is. They wanted a beef tomato of some sort, so they'll get a beefsteak or a big beef or something like that. They wanted something that early girl or something, which gives you a medium-sized, decent tomato. They wanted a bunch of cherry tomatoes, so they pick up, there's a zillion cherry tomatoes. There's some new ones that are pretty cool that have all different colors. Some people really like the yellows or whatever. Just pick up a plant. There's no sin in that. You're still growing stuff for yourself. You're still going to have the joy of harvest. You're still going to have all that stuff. You're still going to know what you did to that plant, whether it's been sprayed or anything else. There's no sin in that. But if you do want real specific varieties that will not be available at your local big box store, or you're concerned about the availability of your big box store, or you can't afford $5 or $6 a piece for a quality seedling. You know, if I buy a pack of seeds, it's going to run me, and I'm not talking at the dollar store, that we're ruling out the dollar store. We're ruling out the cheap sources like that. We're making believe we have to buy from a reputable source. It's going to cost probably between $4 and $6 for a pack of seeds, depending on what the variety of seed is. Some things are more expensive than others. For instance, if I buy a pack of regular lettuce seeds, it might be $3 or $4 for 1,000 seeds or 500 seeds. If I buy from Johnny Select Seeds Salanova lettuce varieties, it's going to probably be 50 cents a seed, and I'll get 25 seeds in a pack, because that is a patented, very carefully grown and bred. Now, it is not GMO. In fact, you could even get it organic, but it is a very specific variety of seed. It's going to cost you more. Most tomato seeds and stuff like that are, they're not pelleted. They are usually not treated. And their packs, you need to read how much is in the pack. It can vary from 10 to 25 seeds per pack. And if you care, you can do the math and figure out what it costs you per seed. And then, I never do the math completely. I mean, I've done the math on Salanova lettuce because I kind of went, choke. They want what for a pack of Salanova lettuce? On the other hand, I'm growing Salanova lettuce right now, and it's January, because they are very cold tolerant, and they are in my greenhouse, and they are very happy. We happen to like Salanova lettuce. I also grow other kinds that are way cheaper. But if you like something, sometimes you have to pay the price for it. It's no difference. The difference between going to the grocery store and buying a hamburger and going to the grocery store and buying a ribeye. You're going to pay for that ribeye, but if ribeye is what you want, you got to decide if you can pay for it or not. The I can get my seeds from dollar store and I do great with them concept. Have I ever bought dollar store seeds? No. Nope. I know people who do. They are happy with them. I probably would not hesitate to grow flowers from the dollar store. Am I going to grow an important crop that I'm relying on as a major portion of my family's food source? No. Just no. Some people will tell you never ever buy seeds from the big box stores. Well, whose seeds are for sale at the big box stores these days? Burpees? Geez, I'm going to draw a blank. But there's about Seeds of Change is sometimes available. There's several what I would call reputable companies that now sell at some of the big box stores. Burpees even sells some of their organic stuff at the grocery store, no less. I think what people are concerned about is that those seed packets may not have been treated properly, because you can ruin seed packets by not storing them properly. How do I feel about that? Well, if I have the time and I have planned out my garden properly and I have all the varieties I want, I will not usually buy from those sources. There have been years, last year was one of them, the previous year was one of them, and there's other years too where it's happened too, where for some reason I either forgot something, they didn't have it in stock. I mean, every year that there is some sort of a seed crop failure. So probably starting about 6 or 8 years ago, we discovered that some of our favorite yellow beans, Carsons, were having seed crop failures. It happens. And they simply were not available for a couple of years in a row. Then they became available again with lesser viability. In other words, they didn't germinate as well. Lately, we've been able to get better quality ones again, but we're still having to go to secondary suppliers. Our regular suppliers don't have them. So actually, this year, we're going to try some new varieties on the theory that there might be something going on with Carson. that maybe it's just somehow the genetics of that particular seed may have gotten messed up a little bit because they've had too many crop failures in a row. I don't know. We are always willing to try new varieties. For some percentage of our seeds, we like to have them as open pollinated seeds that we can collect the actual seeds from and grow again if we need to. For the larger percentage of our seeds, we are now going to F1s. Now, what is an F1? F1 is a hybrid. That means here's mommy, here's daddy, and you take the pollen from this plant and you put it on the mommy, and those seeds will produce an F1. You haven't done anything weird. You haven't done anything genetically unsafe. It's just the same thing that would happen if you, like in my yard here, I don't try and sort out what happens with my hollyhocks. I have multiple colors of hollyhocks that have been planted in the yard, and when I give someone hollyhock seeds, I can tell them it came off a white plant, or it came off a pink plant, or a purple plant, but I can't guarantee that it's going to be that color because a bumblebee could have gone from one to another and cross-pollinated. I don't worry about things like that. Those are F1s. If you want to get technical about it, they're F1s because the color is determined by the genetic makeup of mommy and daddy. Okay? Could you grow an F1 and save the seeds from it in a pinch? Sure. End of times, you do what you need to do. I like to be prepared. I like to think ahead. I don't like to be insanely over the edge on my seed sources and stuff like that. I buy from companies that promise me they're not selling me anything GMO, and sometimes I buy organic and sometimes I don't. You make up your own decisions. You make up your own minds. Sometimes organic seeds are 2 or 3 times as expensive as regular seeds. I do not personally believe that using regular seeds is going to impact the quality of my vegetables. I just don't. I don't think that in most cases anything that got onto them during their growing process is going to be sitting around in that seed and somehow be transferred long-term to the products I get from my garden. I just don't. You make your own decisions. But I think you understand what I'm talking about when I say this now. Use your seed starting date calculator and figure out when you need to plant things. I hope this helps you with your garden planning this year. If you have questions, please ask. I'm more than willing to answer anything I can. And I don't make up answers if I don't know the real answer. I might send you to a website and say, read this article. Sometimes it's easier to have you read an article than it is for me to try and write a 3-page article. But be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because there's lots going on, just lots. And I will be talking about how I actually choose my varieties. So be sure to come back for that one. So until next time, bye.